Like it's so many years later, like we don't see still solar water thermal heaters on every single house on the planet. How do we get climate tech out from this pilot stage where it's still been for like decades and into true scale?
There are lots of amazing products, but they need to be deployed, implemented in actual big business. So that's the only way to move on. That's why we're such believers in the concept of venture clienting.
I'm Aneri,
I'm Dash.
and we are co-founding Klimatic Scale, where we'll be talking about how to scale climate and sustainable solutions so we can actually reach our net zero goals. I will kick off and share a little bit about myself. So why did I get into this whole topic? Why do I care about climate and environment? It was 1998. I was standing on my uncle's rooftop in Gujarat, India, and I was looking out, and I was only in high school at the time, but I looked out and I saw that every single home had a solar water thermal system on their house. And it just kind of clicked in my mind that this is what the future looks like. This is what a renewable energy world looks like. Every home, every community being powered by some form of renewable energy. And I just decided then that that's what I wanted to do is my career.
How old
Uh,
were you?
yeah, I was in Gujarat, India. And I was like in high school. So I was already a little environmental activist back then, doing like recycling campaigns and environmental club groups and stuff. But I think that's what got me into this whole idea of the energy transition before was even coined energy transition. But just seeing very visibly this like image of all these homes with solar rooftops, it was just like very illuminating for me. And that was kind of my aha moment of like what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know at the time what I would do, whether I'd be an engineer or a lawyer or what, but I ended up becoming an ecosystem builder, which we'll talk more about.
Oh,
So, yeah.
I didn't know about the story. That's pretty great. That's so early on. I envy you a bit that you have understood that that's your mission in life so early on. Had a bit of a different flow. Came to me much later. I was working. I co-founded co-working space and a few other projects that were absolutely not in sustainability sphere. And I was really subscribing to this kind of founder efficiency type of mindset. And then I got really slowly disappointed with that. It felt to me that there's very little purposefulness in quite some of the very successful even projects. It's a lot about status and money, and at the same time, I was reading more and more into how like what is happening with our planet, and it really hit me that I want to help and support founders who have positive purpose, something good either for the society or the climate. And then I slowly started working, kind of trying to find, okay, where can I find this impact founders? And then slowly starting to work with them more and more. And yeah, so it was a gradual process actually. And now it feels to me like a mission, but it didn't in the beginning.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you've been working with startups and founders and corporates for so long, and you have so many amazing insights. And one of the ways I see very commonly, startups who are trying to get their first customer, especially with a corporate, is that they try to basically apply to competitions, because that's the easiest way. You don't have the network yet. You don't know the customers yet. So you see like apply to work with Unilever, for example, on this prize and get a introductions to like the team. Um, what do you think about these formats? Do they work? Do they not work? Like, what's your take?
Yeah, so I used to organize and create quite some of those type of open innovation uh, programs, activities, hackathons, was either acting as a coach or trainer for them or organizing them myself. And first, I was a big believer. And then each time I was seeing that there are no actually deals following up. And even like during the process, it would be such a, so let's say a corporate or multiple corporate companies would say, hey, we have this challenge. And it'll be something very vague, like generally energy transition, for example, or generally customer loyalty to green products. And then the founders and startups who come in, they will also offer very unfitting and non-specific solutions. Often they would not even have the experience actually in the industry or with this type of products. And so nothing will come out of it really, except from a nice marketing campaign. And so I got quite disappointed. And that's also why I wanted to work on something that has very specific output, deals with actual budgets behind them, that corporate clients can spend. And what is your experience? Have you also worked a bit with the prizes or innovation theater in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I've organized also some challenges when for various accelerators, and same. It rarely goes beyond pilot. Sometimes there's some nice marketing or publicity that comes out of it, but it's not actually generating to real revenue for the startups. But even worse, it's not actually creating the sustainability impact that everyone had envisioned from the get-go. And so, from a climate and sustainability perspective, if we're not scaling these technologies and we're just experimenting with them and piloting with them, then I mean, I gave that story of like seeing the solar water thermal heaters in 1998. It's 2005, 2025. Like it's so many years later. Like we don't see still solar water thermal heaters on every single house on the planet, you know?
Yeah.
Like but AI is like scaling rapidly. So why are we not seeing this kind of scaling progress, right, all over the world? And how do we get it scaling? How do we get climate tech out from this pilot stage where it's still been for like decades and into true scale?
Mhm.
And that's going to require people to take risks, do things that may not be a little out of the comfort zone, but can actually achieve real results and also unlock real crazy commercial opportunities and that people aren't accessing because they're too afraid to actually push the boundaries on where climate innovation can go. And maybe that's why they get stuck in innovation theater. Well, you said that word dash. Can you tell me what that means? That's really sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think it is right now quite a popular word because there's so much disenchantment in the innovation activities. And basically, innovation theater, it's when this kind of innovation programs and activities are used more as a marketing tool rather than something that brings actual output, and results in implementation of that, said innovation. So it can be like a hackathon that just with a nice social media campaign about, oh, hey, we gather all these founders here and we give them prizes. Um, and the main prize is 50,000 euros. But nothing really happens. There are no deals after that happening. And yeah, that is innovation theater. It's kind of a performance that some innovation is happening. Um, but I also believe that there are lots of smart people working on this type of projects. And to me, it's just such a pity that so much energy and smart brains is focused on something that doesn't get us to actual scaling of the sustainable tech.
Yeah, actually, I feel like corporate prizes fall right under innovation theater from how you defined it. because it's also like it almost feels like a pony show. Like get the most beautiful horse through the competition, and but then at the end of the day, the poor horse is so tired from
Yes.
the
And then the
race.
founders who have to go through one prize or competition thing after another, and how long it takes them. It takes them like months to prepare, and then they win even. But do they get the deal? That's another, I don't know, half a year to try to get the deal actually with the corporate client. And yeah, it just feels like a waste of time for everyone involved, including the innovation teams.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, it's just a grant in the end of the day, like a small grant, a lot of work for a small grant versus an actual client, sales, revenue, the things that actually drive startups forward. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
so
that it's so interesting. Yeah, innovation theater, there's a lot to unpack there, which I think we can get through with this podcast series. So what else? What are hot takes do you have?
So, I wanted actually to ask you about what do you think about this term death by pilot? I've also heard it a lot. And so when we see, so you were talking about the competitions and prizes and innovation theater, and then even when a sustainable startup gets the pilot deal, often they actually still go bankrupt. Have you observed this also? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have, and it's actually very sad because death by pilot is typically happens when a startup has product market fit, has some customers, but now is at an inflection point where they need to be growing and scaling and getting more and more customers to justify their not only their existence, but also make their investors happy and grow their teams and of course the impact grow towards meeting net zero targets. And the pilots are typically the mechanism to unlocking scale, but a lot of times because the pilots don't actually um, move towards long-term commercial contracts, they basically die after like 6 to 9 months of working together with a client. And that's because maybe the client's priorities have changed, or the champions have changed jobs, or, the business case buy-in maybe didn't happen at the top. I mean, there's many reasons for it, but the ultimate sad part of the story is that the client says that they're not going to continue past the pilot stage, and then the startup has to basically start all over again with a brand new client because they spent so much time doing this work for a client that they were hoping to scale with. And that can is really one of the reasons why climate tech has kind of stayed in this piloting part of the innovation curve and not scaling is because of there's still fear or risk around, for the corporate's perspective, of scaling those solutions throughout. Because a lot of startups go to a corporate with this whole land and expand mentality. Like if I just land with this customer and let me give an example. Let's say there's a real estate corporate that has, thousands of buildings, and the pilot is to work with one building out of 1,000 on this sustainable technology. And you're spending 6 months for the corporate to decide whether to expand this technology to all of its 1,000 buildings versus the one. But then after 6 months, with the startup hoping and doing everything they can to please this customer in that 6 month period, that they just end up not doing that. And it just is a very disappointing outcome for everyone. And even the corporate decision makers who are involved in that project, it's not great for them either because they get a win if it scales to other buildings too, right? So it just ends up being disappointing for everybody. And so, how do we get these uh, startups out of the pilot stage and into the scaling stage? And that's basically why we are creating Climatic Group, right, Dash?
That's true. That's true. It seems to be that it's not even only when this follow-up doesn't happen at all. Sometimes the corporate or more established business client says, well, we actually want to work with you further, but not right now. Can you wait a bit? And it's hard for startups to wait for half a year or a year. That might kill them. I've been working with very interesting EV charging, like a mobile EV charging solution. They had actually three pilots, all successful. And for those clients who were interested working with them in the future, but it was quite a process. So in the end, they had to close the company. So they actually went bankrupt, sold the assets. They're non-existent currently. So this is also something that really moves me, to be honest. I've been working with founders for 10 years, and I just want also to help them, especially if they're bringing to us technologies that will save the planet. Yeah. And that's the idea behind Climatic Group, basically to help those products scale and help our planet burn less, slower than it is right now.
Yeah, and but I think also to add to that, I mean, we have a lot of global experience. I know you worked in Southeast Asia.
Yes,
Um,
Sub-Saharan
I worked
Africa, Middle East, LATAM, and you too, right?
right, and the US and we're both based in Berlin. So I think that global network is actually quite interesting, especially because innovations can be found everywhere in the world, not
Yes.
just in the US and Europe. So and actually it's really really cool when have seen in my career when like an Indian technology, for example, does really
Mhm.
well in Germany. And seeing like the exchanges coming from the global south to the global north versus just global north technologies going to the global south.
And also, we have seen there are so many technologies and products are already there, right? We've been
Mhm.
working with accelerators, with founders all around the globe, and there are lots of amazing products, but they need to be deployed, implemented in actual big business. So that's the only way to move on. That's why we're such believers in the concept of venture clienting. And it's quite a new term. We ourselves even found out about it just a few months ago. And before that, it was called, oh, sometimes open innovation, sometimes startup corporate relations. But Aneri, maybe can you share a bit like what does it even mean, venture clienting?
Sure. It's very interesting. It's basically the process of enabling startup collaboration with corporates. So both are very different kind of entities, right? You have the corporate who is very large, very bureaucratic, lots of different teams and lots of different decision makers, and but they can scale the technologies because they have that kind of reach. And then the startups might be at the um, cutting edge of like the latest technologies and solutions. They can move with speed. They're agile. They have really hungry, fast teams, raring to go. So when you kind of get both of them to work together, you can get frustrations appear on both sides because the corporates might say, okay, the startups, like how stable are they? How well do I know they're going to be in operation in a year? Like, are they actually do they have all their risks thought through for their technology in a way that we would when deploying a technology? And then the startup is basically thinking, why is it moving so slowly? Why is it so difficult to get a deal done? We know they need this solution. And this basically should have been implemented yesterday. So why is it taking so long? So venture clienting is basically trying to create a marriage between these two by creating frameworks and processes so that the innovations can actually percolate through the corporate client. Governments can also be a client as well. That's also an example of a slow-moving institution. Uh, that also requires some support and knowledge on how to work with startups. And I would say the venture clienting term is used a bit more in Europe than the US.
I
So
so.
yeah, so I'm American by birth, and like when working with US corporations, they tend their business units tend to already know about startup solutions. I mean, the US has a very vibrant and healthy startup ecosystem, and so there already is a lot of deals happening at that level.
Mhm.
Whereas I feel like in Europe, where I've lived for the past few years now, a lot of the corporates are a little bit more risk averse, a little uncertain about taking on new technologies. Some of them might think that they can build it themselves instead of work with a startup. And what we find is a lot of startups in Europe are actually leaving the European market and actually going to the US and Canada and other markets because it's faster for them to get deals done in these countries than in Europe, which is terrible if you really think about it, because Europe has some of the most progressive legislature on supporting, climate technologies. And yet, if the deals are not happening here, then what does that mean for like our planet, right? Um, so I think venture clienting, it's great that there's this terminology and coinage around it so that it's easier to explain. And yeah, and Dash, like what do you what's been your experience working in Europe? You've been in Europe much longer than I have. Like what like do you feel like there's real opportunity for change?
Absolutely. So what I have seen, there has been lots of generally startup corporate relations also in Europe, right? And there are lots of innovation work, yeah, innovation projects. What have been my observation is that there is this more incremental innovation where usually the big business itself knows best, to be honest. Yeah, it's usually the best solutions are for incremental innovation are coming from within the company. It can be even something like more intrapreneurial type of projects, but it's well covered there. At the same time, so something truly disruptive, it's a bit tough to also find like an existing company that will be disruptive and partner with it in a healthy way. So often that's where CVCs or like corporate venture funds basically are coming in. And those two types, like entrepreneurial projects, or maybe like some kind of venture building within a corporate, and investing into startups has been quite a staple already in Europe. That's something I have seen happening a lot, lots of experience with that. But working with startups specifically as suppliers, that's different. Of course, it has also been happening here and there, but it was not as much in focus. And it seems to me so crazy because there are like studies that show it's 4 times cheaper than almost any other corporate venturing activity. And it's very effective because the product's already there. So comparing if you invest in a startup, you do not know whether actually in the end the product will be as useful as you want it to be. And if you find company that already has the product, it's much easier to apply it to your needs, right? At the same time, it is also much faster. They already, again, have the product. So, and it seems to me it's heavily underused and is right now absolutely on the rise type of term. And I can see here and there's so many companies popping up that are using also this term to differentiate. And we definitely also believe in this concept and would like to shout on the top of the mountain that all corporates should do some venture clienting. So, what are what are your thoughts? Do you think that there already is just established businesses that they're not doing it just because they do not know those products? Maybe they just need a better database, or um, what are your thoughts? What is like why venture clienting is currently not happening at the scale that we believe in?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of FOMO with corporates, FOMO meaning fear of missing out, around tr around working with startups. I mean, there's 30,000 climate startups in Europe. I mean, that's a lot. That doesn't even touch the world population of climate startups, right? So, um, a corporate doesn't obviously have time to sift through 30,000 companies, or plus more from other markets. But there's still the sense of like, if I don't know every company, then I won't find the perfect fit for me.
Mhm.
And that was my experience when I worked for an accelerator where we were trying to match startups to corporates. They just seem to want like massive lists and databases of like every company in ag tech that we could find, for example, like every single one. And it was kind of like, from my perspective, like, okay, I'll share that because they're the client, but like, is that really helpful?
Yeah,
Like, what's
totally.
more helpful is the exact company that we think is a good match for them. I mean, it's almost like dating. Like, do you want to be part of a dating app where you have the most number of people on it? Or do you want to be in a dating app that where the people have like-minded interests and hobbies? So it's easier to find a better match, right? And I don't know, maybe people have different opinions on which one works for them. But like, I would say a match would make more sense if there are some similarities, right, between the
Yes,
needs. And so this is where I feel the databases can kind of be irrelevant for really supporting
yes.
tr fitting matches.
I
And
think there
actually, yeah.
Absolutely. I think there has been like a really database craze in a way in the space. Almost in also all projects I was involved in, the database size would be a really big selling point. And I like to use this selling point when asked, just yeah, if that's what the client wants, but I do not actually believe that it is of real value. Databases, first of all, they get outdated real fast. Even if you have an updating scraper that automatically, updates the database all the time, and there's some quality checks and such, still you cannot possibly have deep understanding of where the company stands and really update it in your database. Then second is that there, yes, there's quite often it is hard for a more established business or corporate business to look for what they need cross industries. So if let's say construction company really wants to get an interesting energy solution, it really might be very hard for them to look on their own through the database and even with some support to get the products through it that will actually add value to them. And yeah, so I think the database craze like it is very overrated. It can be a nice starting point, but right now with AI, the need in databases I think will decrease because in a way, internet is your database. Yeah. And you can get this information through AI in real time. And if you have like a bit more specialized AI tool for that with a bit better interface, then you do not really need a database at all. And I think that's where we're going.
Yeah. But that being said, we do have a database of over 10,000 companies that Dash and I
Yeah.
have just directly or indirectly worked with in our careers, which
Yeah.
is a good place to start for sure. So what we can expect in this podcast series is we're planning to talk to corporate innovation leaders and have them reverse pitch their needs. We'll talk to experts discussing technology market gaps, founders discussing their latest innovative solutions, especially from scale-ups. Scale-ups are basically startups that have already raised Series A, have millions in the bank, and are ready to rear and to go with customers, but are kind of stuck at that scaling curve that I discussed earlier on. And so we're really excited to feature some of those for our audience, and also just, sprinkle all the ways that scaling can happen through venture clienting along the series. Yeah, and our call to action.
Yes, and we hope you will tune in. So what you can learn here is how to scale sustainable technologies in your business if you are part of a corporate team or more established business. If you are a startup founder, you can listen and tune in to the reverse pitches of corporate guests we will have, and also to experts who give an overview of your industry. And generally, for everyone, we will share all these tools and methods that make venture clienting such a great way to actually implement innovation on a bigger scale. So we hope to see you joining our podcast and finding out also how there all of these different industries, from energy to built environment to mobility, can work together to scale sustainable tech.
Yeah, so hit subscribe on our Substack, klimaticgroup.substack.com, and get the latest episodes. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.